some of the reading I've been doing recently about consciousness, there's a distinction often made within the idea of consciousness between, well, at least two different types, but sometimes more. But the two particular types I'm talking about are two different definitions. One that's sometimes called something like reflective consciousness or self-awareness, and the other being pre-reflective consciousness. And I've got that last term particularly from a recent book by Sean Gallagher and Dan Zahawi. The distinction between them is that reflective consciousness or self-awareness is that feeling that we have that not only are we aware of the world around us, we're also aware that we're aware. We can kind of reflect on our own awareness, hence the term reflective, and perhaps report on it, which is kind of the thing I'm doing when I make these videos in some ways. There are some issues with that. It can lead to a kind of infinite regress. I'm aware that I'm aware, I'm aware that I'm aware that I'm aware, and so on. But generally, that kind of awareness of self as an object in the world, and a kind of positing of self, and a discussion of one's own mental state and one's own conscious experiences, is one of the understandings of consciousness. The other, which is in the Gallagher and Zahavi book, as I say, it's called pre-reflective consciousness, and is more associated with a kind of phenomenal awareness, a phenomenal consciousness. It's probably not restricted to humans. My dogs probably have it, and it's well, I'm thinking it right now in terms of like a kind of engagement with the world, so that the fact that I can look out, I can see this holly bush, very large and beautiful holly bush. I don't have to be thinking, oh, I am seeing a holly bush, in order to be aware of that holly bush, or to be conscious of it. It's appearing in my consciousness, or it's constructive of my consciousness, pre its existence as a kind of reflection in my self-awareness. I mean, a number of interesting things, I think, in relation to that distinction. The first is that pre-reflective consciousness that they talk about in that book, and which is called different things in different contexts. Phenomenal consciousness elsewhere. Reminds me of those kinds of conscious engagements, those kinds of engagements of self and body and world, which you find in different kinds of philosophical traditions. It seems to me very reminiscent of Heidegger's notion of engagement, as opposed to reflection. I think he's telling. In Heidegger, engagement is a kind of ideal, natural, if you like, or authentic way of engaging with the world, which avoids or precedes conceptualization, and in his philosophy doesn't have any of the kind of almost effete overtones that reflective conceptualization does have. I have to turn around here because some dogs are going, "Baby guy, come on!" So in Heidegger you get this idea of engagement, which to me seems to be not only pre-conceptual but pre-reflective, pre-analytical. You also get it, I think, in other places as well. You get it in Sorrow, which I've spoken about before, and slightly more differently accented. I think you get it in writings about particular kinds of mental states associated with optimal performance. So in Czikszentmihalyi's writing about flow, the description of that particular mental state in which one is completely absorbed in the activity in a way which, as I say, allows optimal performance. That condition itself also seems to me to be closely associated with pre-reflective consciousness, to be not self-conscious, and to optimally perform, you can't be self-conscious. Okay, so those things are in place, I think. The other thing that I'm quite interested in relation to that distinction between pre-reflective consciousness and reflective consciousness is the kinds of sensory metaphors that we use when we talk about those two different kinds of consciousness. And maybe not just using language, maybe we exploit in terms of our own self-explorations, if you like. Certainly the terms themselves seem indicative of something going on there to do with sensory metaphors. Self-awareness and reflective consciousness, that kind of I am thinking that I am thinking state, tends to almost exclusively draw on visual metaphors, and reflective consciousness being very visual. This idea that you can posit yourself as an object in the world, and again it's sometimes called objective consciousness, posit yourself as an object in the world and then perceive that object from some kind of other self-aware position, is very mobilizing of visual metaphors. The object is a visual object. It seems to be placed out there at some remove from the viewpoint, and so again it's very visual. And pre-reflective consciousness or engagement doesn't seem to rely on visual metaphors at all. If it relies on sensory metaphors, which I think it does, it's metaphors of contact, metaphors of communion almost, or absorption, where there's very close proximity, I suppose, possibly very close contact, possibly identicality, not sure that's a word, but a sense in which one is standing in the same position that the body doing the perceiving is standing. So it's very close to a kind of proprioceptive understanding of consciousness. And again, I think here that's revealed in kind of vernacular language when we talk about the feel of things, and the sense of engagement itself. Engagement means to be intimately locked into the experience in a way which is not detached and not reminiscent of that kind of distance that visual orientations tend to suggest. So yeah, just to sum up that, I think there's that distinction between pre-reflective consciousness and reflective consciousness or self-awareness has played itself out in the various metaphors that we use to talk about those different mental states, with reflective consciousness predominantly drawing on visual metaphors and pre-reflective consciousness predominantly drawing on proprioceptive or tactile metaphors of touch and feeling.